Talk about second referendums, extensions and all the rest of it, and a general feeling that we won't now be leaving on March 29th, I do keep making this argument that actually the law of the land is that we are due to leave at 11 p.m. on March 29th, because that is part of the legislation that went through Parliament. So let's find out, shall we? What would need to happen? What would Mrs May have to do to change that legislation? But more importantly, if she decides in the next 48 hours that basically the game's up, her reputation shredded, her party are on the middle, perhaps of splitting horribly, that staring down the barrel of European elections would be even more disastrous, and that maybe she wants us actually to leave with no deal on Friday because that's the only way she can save herself, what would then have to happen, and could she be stopped? Joining me to talk through this is Martin Howe, QC. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning.
Am I right in telling LBC listeners that the law of the land says we're leaving at 11 p.m. this Friday?
Well, you are right, but they're subject to one point.
Yep.
In order to change the date in the 2018 Act from the 29th of March, it is necessary that a so-called statutory instrument is passed, and that needs to be passed by an affirmative resolution in each House of Parliament. That can be done this week, and indeed the government is intending to lay this before both houses. However, the government has done something very, very surprising indeed, because on Friday, Sir Tim Barrow, the UK permanent representative in Brussels, wrote a letter which appears to agree unconditionally to the extension to the 12th of April that was negotiated by Theresa May last week.
Yeah.
And that arguably has the effect that in international law, the United Kingdom is already committed to an extension before the House of Commons has actually voted on that extension to change the law. This is certainly contrary to all long-standing constitutional precedent and convention, and it runs a very dangerous risk, or if the House refuses to agree to the statutory instrument, then there will be a chaotic divergence between the United Kingdom's international obligations and the domestic law.
Gosh, are the Foreign Office now running the country, Martin Howe?
Well, I'm quite amazed by this. It's quite astonishing that they've done this. It's certainly contrary to all precedent. Whenever the United Kingdom enters into international treaties or other international obligations which require changes to be made in domestic law, the practice is always that the government awaits the decision of Parliament on whether to make the necessary legal changes before committing the United Kingdom to those changes in the international plane. And they've done this, it seems to me, simply to try and intimidate Parliament and jump the gun. And of course, a further thing to look at is whether this is actually legal for them to have done this.
If it's deemed not to be legal, and you say that the government intends to put the statutory instrument before Parliament this week, what if Mrs May was to realise today that the game's completely up, her own party is in tatters, her legacy, her historical legacy is going to be zero? What if she decided that she wanted to stick with the legislation? And she's got this big meeting taking place this afternoon at Chequers, and it's really quite interesting in terms of who's turning up at it. Boris Johnson, Dominic Raab, Jacob Rees-Mogg, David Davis, Ian Duncan-Smith and Damien Green. What if she decided, Martin, actually, the only way I can save my own skin is to go for a no deal? Could she be stopped?
She probably couldn't, but I think, this is wishful thinking.
Yes.
I don't think there's the slightest chance of Theresa May doing that at all. She's said hundreds of times that no deal is better than a bad deal.
Yep.
And it's clear every single time she's said that, she has been completely insincere and never willing actually to carry through on it. So
Yes.
I suspect this meeting is simply yet another attempt to persuade them to push her terrible deal through by threatening them all with something worse, like a long Article 50 extension or no Brexit.
Is it possible, and Martin, you know many of these people well, is it possible that the Jacob Rees-Moggs of this world look at the crisis we're in and decide, you know what, her deal's absolutely awful, but maybe better that than years of uncertainty? Is it possible that she can overturn a loss of 149 votes last time round?
No, well, I can't see any prospect of her overturning enough of them. The problem is that her deal is actually creates years of uncertainty. It makes it certain that we will have at least 2 years of turmoil-filled negotiation for the future deal, and that will be done against a background where we've given away almost all our negotiating cards and where we're threatened with dropping into the backstop if we don't do the deal the EU wants. So I'm afraid her deal, I've said this before, but her deal is much, much worse than an Article 50 extension, because we will be subject to the European Union's laws with no vote under her deal. If we have an Article 50 extension, at least we will still have a vote, and we won't be subject to the backstop, so we can actually negotiate much more strongly. I can say I'm very, very much against an Article 50 extension. That would be a betrayal of the referendum results,
Yes.
but it is much better than her deal.